So now that that's up to date, let's see if we can get it in Home Assistant. I'm going to copy my encryption key, and then I'm going to switch over to Home Assistant. If you're setting this up as new in Home Assistant, you would go to Notifications and then see New Devices Discovered, and you should see a new device under ESP Home. Since I've already set this up, it's showing me a Reconfigure button, but in your case, it would, if it was a new device, it would be a blue Configure button. So I'm going to hit Reconfigure, and it's asking me for my new encryption key, which then I'm just going to paste it from the connected app and submit, and now it's re-authenticated. Cool. So now I can find it in my devices, and this is the one called GDO White. That's what I named it, right? So the garage door is currently closed. We know that because you can tap on this, it says close, and the down button, the close button is grayed out, the up button is enabled. So if I hit that, I hear the garage opening, and the dog does too. Yeah. Don't worry, Finn.
Wow.
Cool. Now that it's open, I can close it from with Home Assistant. Yeah. The dog's gonna freak out. There's a bunch of diagnostic information that Home Assistant will also pull in. Now let's see if you wanted to integrate it with SmartThings. Let's switch over to SmartThings and check that out. Okay, now to set it up in SmartThings, make sure that Connected Cloud is enabled in the settings, which we have done. And then once Connected Cloud is enabled, then all you need to do is add it in SmartThings. So let me just launch the SmartThings app and go to Devices, click the plus icon to add a device, and then we're going to look under Partner Devices because we are a SmartThings partner. And then scroll down to K and look for Connected. Okay, once I hit Connected, it's going to ask me to log in to my connected account. I'm going to go in with my Google account that's linked. This is probably going to pull in a lot of testing devices. Yeah, just what I thought. But there's the one that we're actually just setting up. So there's the GDO White. And I'll put the room to be garage. So that should have pulled that in. And then let's go over to garage. There's the device. And it's showing that it's open. And let me close it. What's going on with this? You hear the warning going, and now it's closing. And now it's closed.